Hello, it's 10 a.m., so we're going to give 5 more minutes. We don't even have the chair yet. And then we start at 10:05.
Good morning. This is Toby Tobias. I am present.
Morning, Toby. We're going to give 5 more minutes to see if the chair shows up.
Okay, very good.
Cristina. Hello, Cristina.
Yes. Mhm.
Ok, cuando empecemos ahora, para roll call, lee los nombres que aparecen en el participant list,
Okay.
and then Michelle can start. Hello, Michelle. We can start now with the members present. Eddie is going to join us soon, and
Okay.
then the group will just look at the things that we need to take action if we have not taken action before. So
Okay.
we can start with a roll call by Cristina.
Okay, good morning. Let's do the roll call. Miguel Rolón,
No, just list,
just
mention
read
the
the
name
list.
of everybody present. Don't worry.
Graciela García Moliner, Lía Jai Rivera, Michelle Duval, Cristina Carter, Cristina Olan, Carlos Farchetti, David Ortiz, Diana Martino. I have an iPhone guest, also an iPhone Mike Funk, Iris Olivera.
Prior to that being,
Mike Funk here.
Okay. Kelly Montenero, Kevin McCarthy, Madeleine Guyant, Marsha Taylor, Maria Lopez Mercer, Mabel Maldonado, Orián Sadik, Rachel Eckley, Sarah Stephenson, William Tobias, Patricia. Those are the names in the list.
Okay, thank you, Cristina. Michelle, can we start?
Yes, I am going to share my screen here shortly. Okay, you all, can you see that, Miguel? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put it in presentation mode. And then I will get started. I'll also share my video. So hello, everybody. I wish I was there to see you all in person. And I want to thank everybody for their patience during this process of development of the strategic plan. Obviously, we would have liked to have done most of this in person, but COVID being what it is, I think we've done a great job using this virtual platform. So this should be your last meeting, your last virtual meeting with respect to development of the strategic plan. And our focus for today is the island-specific strategies for the strategic plan. So I just want to provide a quick outline for what I'm going to cover today. So first, I'm just going to briefly review the previous DAP and council actions. I'll give a quick reminder of what the strategic plan components are and the organization of the council strategic plan. And then our goal for today is to review and approve a final version of the draft strategies for the island-specific objectives. And so back at the end of March, all three of the DAPs met individually and reviewed and approved the draft island-specific objectives for each of the goal themes. And then you also provided some initial review and feedback on the potential strategies for each of the island-specific objectives. And then the council at its meeting at the end of April reviewed and selected draft vision, mission, and goal statements, and also approved island-specific objectives that had been reviewed by you all and in some cases adjusted. And so I always like to just quickly review the strategic plan components. So, again, the vision is really the aspirational statement of what the council would like U.S. Caribbean fisheries to look like in the future. The mission is really the council's mandate for management under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, and it also reflects the council's general approach to achieving its vision. The goals are those big picture focus areas that really describe the ultimate impact of the council's work. The objectives are sort of mini steps to achieve the goals. They are specific and observable. They just should describe intended results and really can be directly linked to an issue or a problem. And then finally, we have the strategies, which again is our focus here today. So these are the approaches that the council will take to meet its objectives. And I always like to come back to this little example of to illustrate the relationship among these different strategic plan components, particularly objectives and strategies. So, again, my problem is that I'm tired, I'm grumpy, and my pants don't fit. And so to address this problem, I have my aspirational vision that I look and feel fabulous. And the goal that I have set to achieve this vision is to get healthy. So I have these three observable, specific objectives that are linked to my problem. Those objectives are exercise more, eat better, and lower stress. And then to meet each of these objectives, I have a suite of strategies or approaches to try to meet each of those objectives. And so with respect to the structure of the council strategic plan and how these components fit into that, the council has one vision and mission, as well as 4 different goal themes underneath which all of the council's work will be united. And those goal themes are management, ecosystem and resource health, social, cultural, and economic issues, and communication and outreach. And to better reflect the unique characteristics and the priorities of each of the council's 3 districts, we have island-specific objectives under the first 3 of those goal themes. So the communication and outreach goal theme does not have island-specific objectives because of its overall importance to the council's entire jurisdiction. But for each of the other 3 goal themes, we do have island-specific objectives and then strategies associated with within each of those island-specific objectives. And so I also wanted to quickly review the draft vision statement, mission statement, and goal statements that the council selected as its preferred during the April council meeting. So the draft vision statement is thriving and resilient island ecosystems, fisheries, and fishing communities that provide cultural, social, and economic benefits for all. So this is the aspirational statement of what the council would like U.S. Caribbean fisheries to look like. And then the draft mission statement is the Caribbean Fishery Management Council conserves, restores, and manages fishery resources in the U.S. Caribbean consistent with the requirements of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. The council is committed to advancing the collaborative stewardship of these fisheries and supporting island ecosystems through education, outreach, and stakeholder input. So again, the mission is the council's mandate for management under the Magnuson-Stevens Act. It's the reason why the council exists, and it also reflects the council's general approach to achieving this vision. And so these are the 4 draft goal statements. So the first one is management, which reads, advance management approaches that promote healthy local fisheries and ecosystems, consider the needs of island fishing communities, and foster collaboration among management partners. The draft ecosystem and resource health goal statement is promote sustainable utilization of local marine resources in a manner that maintains local ecological structure and function and provides for resilient fishery resources. The draft social, cultural, and economic issues statement is ensure that management decisions consider the unique characteristics and needs of island fishing communities while promoting fair and equitable resource use. And then the communication and outreach draft goal statement is engage, educate, and inform a variety of audiences to improve public understanding and participation in the council process. And so again, our goals for today's meeting are to review the previous feedback and edits to the draft strategies for each of the island-specific objectives. And Those are underlined in the presentation so that you can clearly identify the feedback that you all provided during our meeting at the end of March, and then to provide any additional suggestions and edits to the draft strategies and approve those for council review. So once each of the DAPs this week has had the opportunity to provide that additional input, that will be incorporated into the overall draft strategic plan, which will be presented to the council in July. And so before we get into each of the different goals, I'll just remind everyone again that these draft strategies and the objectives that you saw last time are all based on feedback that you provided during our strategic planning sessions that we had back in August, where you all identified sort of a suite of top 5 priorities within each of those, the first 3 goal themes, as well as within the communication goal theme, and then also incorporated the goals and objectives from the island-based fishery management plans, as well as feedback from your management partners. So the NOAA Fisheries, both the Southeast Regional Office and the Southeast Fisheries Science Center, as well as the USVI DPNR DFW. So the first thing I'd like to do is get into the draft management goal. I'm not going to read this again for you. You guys can see it on the screen. And what I will do is I will review, we have a couple slides that have the draft strategies under each of the different goals. And so what I'll do is I'll review the objective and the draft strategies that are on each slide. And then I'm going to pause and ask if folks have additions or edits that they would like to contribute to that. So the St. Croix draft management strategies under the first 2 island-specific objectives are here on the screen. So the first objective is support the development and implementation of accurate, timely, and cost-effective data collection, reporting, and monitoring programs. And I'll just note that during your last meeting, you all added "and implementation" up here after development. And so the draft strategies, you all didn't have any edits or suggestions the last time we met, but those draft strategies were to support NOAA Fisheries and USVI DPNR efforts to improve recreational reporting and establish an Mrip survey, Marine Recreational Information Program survey in St. Croix as per the Mrip Regional Implementation Plan, to support efforts by USVI to review and modify licensing requirements to improve catch reporting, to support Southeast Fisheries Science Center efforts to work with DPNR to design and implement a multi-mode catch sampling program, to collaborate with the USVI DPNR on education and outreach regarding accurate catch reporting, and prioritize data collection for species subject to seasonal and area closures. The second objective was promote fisher involvement and other collaborative research approaches to meeting island-specific science and information needs. Excuse me. And the draft strategies there were to support joint Southeast Fisheries Science Center, DPNR, and National Park Service deer selectivity studies in St. Croix to identify opportunities for fishers to contribute to biological samples for parrotfish and other species, support research by academic science partners to improve data-limited species assessments, collaborate with science partners to develop a St. Croix specific list of research needs. And then the one that you all added was ensure that closed areas are correctly marked by buoys, for example, Buck Island. So, Mr. Chairman, I am actually going to pause there and see if anyone has any edits or anything that they would like to contribute to this.
Yes, good morning, Michelle. This is Toby. How are you?
I'm good, Toby. How are you?
Good. Just a couple questions for you on the first section. I know you said that we indicated that we wanted an implementation to be added. Should this not also be added in the St. Thomas section as well, since we're really talking about the same thing?
So that was, because this is the St. Croix District Advisory Panel, and each District Advisory Panel made its own edits to its own island-specific objectives. I think if the St. Croix DAP chooses to add that phrase, they can do so.
I guess the question that I'm asking is this not happening now? In other words, is data not being collected?
Certainly data is being collected. I think the, this objective really addresses supporting the current efforts as well as future efforts.
Okay, thank you for answering that. Another question, the first section for draft status, draft strategies references recreational reporting. However, the other bullets after that don't specify whether they relate to commercial or recreational or both. Should they, or is it just understood both?
I think it is just understood both, that by not specifically referencing commercial or recreational, that it applies equally to both. However, if you would like to specify commercial and recreational, we can certainly do that.
I thought that since you referenced recreational in the first bullet, that perhaps something ought to be said in the others as well.
And so I think the reason that recreational is referenced in that first bullet is because, the Marine Recreational Information Program has not existed previously in the Virgin Islands, and efforts are currently underway to do so and to address that. And so it was very specific with respect to recreational reporting, because there is some commercial reporting that already does occur. And that's why recreational was very specific in that bullet.
I see. Would it be necessary to state that we should be reviewing and assessing preliminary Mrip surveys that have been conducted in St. Croix?
When you say reviewing and assessing preliminary Mrip surveys, do you mean that the council would review the data that are being collected?
The first bullet indicates establish an Mrip survey in St. Croix as per regional implementation plan. My understanding is that there have been surveys that have been conducted already in St. Croix. Some successful, some not successful. That's why I indicated review and assess those surveys in order to determine what direction to go into.
I see. Okay. And so again, I guess, so is the thinking that the council would be a part of that assessing of the success of those surveys?
Yes, I'm certain the council would be a part.
Okay, thanks, Toby. So you're suggesting that we add something here under this first bullet that says establish an Mrip survey in St. Croix as per the Mrip regional implementation plan, and assess surveys that have already been, the success of surveys that have already been conducted?
Something of that nature, yes.
Okay. I see Marcia has her hand up. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for putting this together. I had some questions when I was reading it. Some of the acronyms I'm not familiar with, so I'm just wondering if, in the future we can put together a list of all the acronyms, make it a little easier. When reviewing this, I was looking at it with an eye towards what the other islands had done. And so on the first objective, I noticed St. Thomas had included the last bullet in theirs, which was support USVI efforts to examine licensing modifications and improvements. And I thought, well, that's really true for St. Croix too. So I think that should be added to our objective 10 for St. Croix. And concerning the other objective 11, the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet down where you have collaborate with science partners, I'd like to add and Fishers to develop, and then I'd like to add and prioritize St. Croix specific list of research needs, because we all know there are probably 100 different needs, but they really need to be prioritized. And then also St. Thomas had an additional bullet at the end, which was develop educational materials to promote fisher understanding of science and information needs. And I think that's certainly something we could use as well. So I'd like to suggest that we add that bullet as well.
Okay, Marcia, so let me go back up here. And so under this first bullet, you're also suggesting to again add the bullet that was under the St. Thomas, St. John objectives of support USVI efforts to examine licensing modifications and improvements.
Yes.
Okay. And then let me see, excuse me, after that, if I can go back and address Toby's suggestions as well. Okay, and then Toby, you also wanted to add something under this first bullet about sort of reviewing and assessing recreational surveys that have occurred thus far.
Yes, perhaps it could read support NOAA Fisheries and USVI DPNR efforts to improve recreational port sampling. Following review of previous Mrip survey results.
To improve. I might just add another bullet here. Let's see, to improve recreational reporting and port sampling. Is that, let's see. Improve recreational reporting, port sampling, and what was the other piece of that? Like review the previous pilot, because my understanding is that there's been pilot studies that have been conducted, but I might actually, I see that I think Kevin McCarthy is here, and so I might turn to Kevin maybe to just see if he could provide a little bit of clarity on that. Hate to put you on the spot, Kevin.
Oh, that's all right. I'm not sure which all projects Toby means specifically. I know that there have been some short-term things that I think like MRAG Americas was down and did a contract. I'm not sure if that was in St. Croix or St. Thomas or both. There've been some efforts to sample at fishing tournaments, and those may be ongoing. So they're in the past couple of years, there was some work looking at basically some pilot, really preliminary kinds of things to maybe design a survey looking at the for-hire sector, for example, on a larger, more inclusive basis. We're working in partnership. The Science Center and Department of Fish and Wildlife are working on a port sampling project to design a survey that will include both improved port sampling of the commercial sector as well as the recreational sector, which, as everybody noticed, has mentioned, that there hasn't been consistent sampling of over time. There've just been those little short-term projects. So there is, for sure, there's information out there. Some of it resides at the Science Center, and other data sets may reside with Fish and Wildlife. But that's certainly something we could investigate, what is available.
And so, I mean, just to make sure everyone's clear, so it is all part of the Marine Recreational Information Program, Regional Implementation Plan, all of these activities that are focused on, trying to improve recreational reporting in the USVI. Is that correct?
It's sort of the work that we're doing now is sort of outside of Mrip, but it's with the goal of being certified by Mrip.
Okay.
So we're not doing something that's a wholly different kind of data collection. We may have different methods that we think are better for St. Croix, for example, than maybe the Mrip survey that was developed for places like Florida. What Mrip does may not be entirely appropriate for St. Croix. It may be, but that's one of the things we're going to explore.
And presumably those explorations would feed into the regional implementation plan for the US Caribbean to the Southeast Regional Implementation Plan. When I looked at it, it was like there were different components for the Caribbean versus the other regions that were specific to the Caribbean, and with the understanding that different approaches would need to be taken in the Caribbean.
Right. Yeah. We don't want to try and implement something that's inappropriate, but yeah, we'd want to get the Mrip blessing at the end. Once we have established a method, we'd want to get have it certified by Mrip as the way to something that they approve of, and that would be the goal. But it may look very different in St. Croix than it does in Florida.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So Toby, I'm adding something here to try to see. So what I've done is added here support NOAA Fisheries and USVI DPNR efforts to improve recreational reporting, port sampling, and review previous pilot efforts to establish an Mrip survey in St. Croix. And maybe we can simply delete this last part right here. Would that maybe address what you were trying to add?
I believe that's quite close, and I certainly think that Kevin is correct in that the Mrip survey developed for Florida may not be what we want to go with here. I just wanted to indicate, though, that we have done some previous work here in St. Croix, and that information should be reviewed first in order to step forward in some type of a official Mrip program.
So what if we add certified here like that? Would that maybe do it?
I think that's fine.
Okay. And Marcia, I see you, it looks like you still have your hand up. Did you have something else you wanted to add as well on this slide?
Yeah, well, no, it's down on the next objective. You haven't gotten there. Okay, so you said you added a list of prioritized research. Should that be prioritized?
Yes, thank you for
actually, what I said is develop and prioritize, but
okay,
this
sorry.
is the same. I guess it comes to the same thing. But and then I also asked that another bullet be added, which was bullet number 6 from St. Thomas, which is Develop educational materials to promote fisher understanding of science and information needs.
Okay. How's that?
Great, thank you.
Yep. And Marcia, just to your previous point about acronyms, I absolutely understand it's really more for trying to fit everything into the framework here. So the full text of the plan will have all of these items spelled out, and we'll also include an acronyms list.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Looks like Sarah is asking for a turn to speak in the chat.
Hi, thank you. This might be a moot point now, but I was just going to provide a little bit of information on that Mrip regional implementation plan. So a plan was drafted and put together in 2017, and it had 3 priorities listed in it, one of which was to establish the Mrip survey in the USVI. But you've already kind of struck it out from here, so maybe it's not warranted. But that plan does include a kind of historical just description of every effort that had been conducted in both St. Croix and St. Thomas. So I wasn't sure if Toby had seen that. If he hadn't, I can drop it in the chat. There's a link to it on our webpage, and he could look over it and see if it was accurately represented, if there's anything he would like to add, because we do need to revise that plan, I believe this year, since it's been about 5 years. So I would be willing to take suggestions that we could put in the next round. But we still have the regional implementation team is reviewing that original plan and looking at the priorities and asking, are those still valid? Are they still in the right order? And we're going to put all of those kind of updates into the next version of the plan. So I just wanted to give you that information.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. And that's actually the regional Mrip implementation plan that I had reviewed and seen. And so that's where some of this came from. So I think that would probably be super helpful for everyone if you're able to provide that link.
Okay, I just put it in the chat. Just let me know if you can't access it, anybody, and I can get it to you.
Great, thank you. So with that, then I did uncross out the as per the Mrip regional implementation plan, because it sounds like perhaps that language is still appropriate at this time with respect to establishing an Mrip certified survey, in the Virgin Islands, including St. Croix. Okay, so are there any other thoughts or contributions on this particular slide, and before moving on to the next one? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone with a hand raised or anything, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. So these are the other 2 St. Croix island-specific objectives, the first of which is ensure that management measures encourage regulatory compliance and foster effective enforcement. And based on your previous review, you didn't have any additions or edits to these draft strategies, but as they are, it is coordinate with NOAA Office of Law Enforcement and USVI Department of Planning and Natural Resources to review consistency of existing regulations for federally managed species, support cross-training of enforcement personnel, identify enforcement gaps for existing St. Croix regulations, review regulations for effectiveness and or redundancy, develop clear, understandable compliance guides for commercial and recreational fishers, And then the next objective is collaborate with domestic and international partners to promote adaptive and efficient management that considers diverse community interests. And so you did have several additions for the draft strategies under here. The first, which was work with NOAA Fisheries and DPNR to reduce bycatch through gear and seasonal modifications, work with DPNR and NOAA Office of Law Enforcement to develop consistent regulations where appropriate, ensure measures accommodate St. Croix local ecosystem productivity, involve both the St. Croix Fisheries Advisory Committee and District Advisory Panel and reviewed development of management measures to evaluate commercial and recreational community impacts. And then the three that you added were ensure that management measures consider and address the potential impacts of climate change, ensure that management approaches consider the impacts of invasive species, and explore underutilized species as a means to reduce pressure on currently fully utilized species. And so I think Marcia has her hand raised. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, just a couple little things. On the first bullet on the first strategy you have up on screen, I'd like to add, and in addition to DPNR US Coast Guard, which I think the St. Thomas group had already added, but I think we need to have that in ours as well. And the last bullet, I'd like, instead of saying commercial and recreational fishers, I'd like to include a broader group, commercial and recreational stakeholders, or something that includes the fishers and additional stakeholders. I'm not quite sure what that word is, but there are other people besides the fishers. I think that should be included here.
So you had a couple different suggestions. So for commercial and recreational fishers and other stakeholders, or for commercial and recreational stakeholders, or commercial and recreational fishers and other ocean users.
Right. I think the first one that you mentioned.
For commercial and recreational fishers and other stakeholders?
Yes.
Okay.
And do you want me to move on to the next objective, or wait until?
Yeah, go ahead. And any suggestions, edits that you have, please go ahead and just.
Okay, so on the second bullet you have there on that slide, there was an additional bullet that was added by St. Thomas, and I guess I wanted to get the feedback from the other members of the FAC whether they thought that was a bullet that we should include also. And that was, I believe, the last bullet from St. Thomas, which included participate in international forums such as WCAF and CRFM in efforts to improve understanding and management of Caribbean-wide resources. But these are organizations I wasn't really familiar with, and at least the second one we're not even a member of. So I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but I guess I'm throwing it out there to my other FAC members and as to whether we should include this bullet also, which the St. Thomas group added.
And so that is it's WCAFC, which is the Western and Central Caribbean Fisheries Commission, and Miguel might be able to address that. That there are some WCAFC work groups that I think the council supports and participates in to make sure that the Caribbean Council's priorities are heard. But I guess I would defer to Miguel right now to further explain that.
Okay, actually, you can you can drop anything that is related to international, because at this group, the WCAFC, the Western Central Atlantic Fishery Commission, and the CRFM, which is the Caribbean Fishery Regional Mechanism, the U.S. delegation is the one who represents us. And in our case, since the get-go, we have been able to participate as members of the delegation of the U.S. at each one of these meetings. And also lately, in the last 15, 20 years, we have been coordinating with them with the logistics and all that. So rest assured that everything that the DAPs provide to the council in terms of comments about fisheries that are, let's say, of importance throughout the Caribbean, we convey the message through the U.S. delegation. Actually, we had done so many times. For example, in the case of the Spiny lobster FMP, the depths of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands asked for 3.5 carapace lengths, minimum 3.0, and that's what we have. We implemented the WCAFC region, the Western Central Atlantic Fishery Commission, a minimum size of 3.0. That was something that it took us some time because before that, we didn't have a uniform 3.3, and a uniform carapace length for spiny lobster. It still is a work in progress, but the point is that we were able to funnel the information from the DAPs through the council, through the U.S. delegation. And that's the way we operate. We, the United States, because the council doesn't have a say-so as to the way the Department of State decides to run the business for international fishery organizations.
Okay,
Thanks, Miguel. Does that help, Marcia?
yeah, it does help. Thank you. But I guess I'm not going to necessarily suggest we add this bullet unless there's other support from other people in the DAP. So I just wanted to make it clear to everybody that that is a bullet that the St. Thomas group had and we don't. I don't know how important it is, but unless somebody else thinks it's important, it's fine the way it is to me.
And let me remind everybody that the reason why you are doing this separate is because you have to be doing this separate. The island-based FMP will be implemented by islands, and whatever St. Thomas and John says doesn't needs to be your goal and objective or strategy. St. Croix prioritizes things the way you see it, and then St. Thomas do the same thing. Then the council take that in consideration and decide finally the way that the plan will be implemented. But it's up to you. It's up to you whether you would like to join on the same thought or you want to keep it separate. It's up to you.
Thanks, Miguel. Anyone else? Toby, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. I think that the council is already doing this and taking care of it on the regional Caribbean level. So I don't think it's really necessary for us to indicate that as St. Thomas did. I did have something under the first set of bullets though, and I added educate the executive, legislative, and judicial branches of the ecological importance of fisheries regulations. I think this is really necessary in order to help enforcement along, because many times enforcement personnel do their job only to have things fall apart as it goes through another branch of the government. As an example, the judiciary system, and individuals who perhaps should not be commercial fishing simply get a slap on the wrist and then they're back doing it again. So I think education is needed on all levels of the government.
And do you mind repeating exactly what you said, Toby, with respect to the wording?
Yes, I indicated.
Michelle and Toby, if I may, you have to reword this by saying that outreach and education material will be available for the legislators whenever they need it, because we cannot educate the legislator, Senate or House in Puerto Rico or the Assembly in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So what the council can do is that to have materials, share materials whenever required by the legislators, and it will be up to the local government officials to ask for that. So it's a minor point, but we can just, it's just to provide the materials, etc. when requested. Otherwise, the lawyers get nervous about this.
So I'm trying to address Toby's suggestion of, I think, making sure that educational materials are available. Maybe it's, and this might be something that Toby, I would say hang on to as well and think about whether this might fit better under communication and outreach, but maybe it's ensure that educational materials are available for decision makers,
As needed.
you know, yeah, as needed, or
As needed, because as needed will be, you know, include when they request everything.
Thank you for clarifying that, Miguel.
And again, I would say, you know, this might be something that fits better under the communication and outreach. Although Toby, it sounded like you were wanting to make sure that educational materials that are specific to compliance and enforcement were available for those decision makers. Is that roughly correct?
Yes, that's correct. I did have one bullet to add under the next section,
Okay.
and that was to develop interagency coordination for a permit-friendly approach for FAD deployment. It appears as if this has become a very difficult thing now to do through the various intergovernmental agencies.
So maybe, I don't know if the council can actually develop that interagency coordination, but it might be, you know, it might be able to support interagency coordination with respect to permitting of FAD deployment.
Perhaps that's a better word for it.
So what I, excuse me, what I included was support the development of interagency coordination for permitting of FAD deployment. Does that capture what you were saying, Toby, or do some words need to be changed there?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
I just think you need an and before USGS in the first one.
Oh, yes. You mean US Coast Guard, and yep. Okay, any other contributions on that? If not, we're going to move on to the next goal area. Okay. Silence means everybody agrees. So the next goal theme is ecosystem and resource health. So again, this is just the draft statement that was selected by the council during its April meeting. And these are the St. Croix draft ecosystem and resource health strategies. So the first objective is implement the fishery ecosystem plan as a roadmap for future council actions to maintain the ecological relationships, rules, and services of the St. Croix Island ecosystem. And you all did have some modifications that and additions from our last meeting at the end of March. And again, those are indicated by the underlined text. So those draft strategies were collaborate with science partners and stakeholders, for example, other non-governmental organizations, the Nature Conservancy, CORE, commercial and recreational fishers, to identify gaps and improve local biological and ecosystem information for St. Croix, evaluate existing spawning season closures in closed areas, such as mutton snapper and Lang Bank, to determine contributions to ecosystem integrity, establish a process to incorporate ecosystem information and approaches into management measures for St. Croix, ensure that ecosystem-based management approaches are responsive to climate change. And then this one that you added, explore the use of underutilized and underdeveloped species and resources to reduce pressure and maintain ecological relationships. And then the second objective was identify, manage, and protect coral reef and other fishery resource habitats of St. Croix. So you had one addition under here, but the draft strategies were develop council habitat policies that address impacts to essential fish habitat from coastal development, erosion and sedimentation, and other forms of pollution that impact St. Croix habitats, support modifications to territorial coastal zone regulations that reduce sedimentation and erosion, work with management partners to establish clear goals for the 5-year essential fish habitat review, ensure that essential fish habitat designations account for ecological roles and relationships of species, utilize the council's essential fish habitat comment authority to address federally permitted projects that may impact ecologically sensitive habitats. And then one that you all added, ensure that juvenile habitats are sufficiently protected. So again, if folks have any additions or suggestions with respect to the strategies, Marcia.
Okay, just one little thing on the first bullet, on the first objective you have shown. So after to identify gaps and prioritize ecological data needs to, and then just add that, and then it continues improve local biological ecosystem. So again, just identifying a whole bunch of gaps doesn't help. We need to prioritize which ones are most important. And
so do you mind just repeating that for me? So
sure,
to identify
sure.
gaps and prioritize
Ecological data needs to, and then going to continue with improve, as you have it, improve local biological and ecological information for St. Croix.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes, Michelle, I have some on the second set of bullets.
Okay, yep.
I wanted to add promote review of East End Marine Park Management Plan. This was something that was supposed to have been done at a 5-year interval, but has never been done. I would also add promote a boating infrastructure plan. And promote single point moorings, both inshore and offshore, to reduce impacts to essential fish habitat.
Did I get all those? Okay, Toby?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Back to that very first one. Promote review, and I also had and update of East End Marine Park Management Plan.
Okay. So I'm wondering if, Toby, that if you might want to make this more general to any marine managed areas, that there be, promote sort of the regular update and review of marine managed areas, and then in parentheses, for example, the East End Marine Park Management Plan, so that it's not just one specific area, but that this strategy could be applied to other areas as well.
Yes, I think that would be a good approach.
Okay, let's see.
And put the East End Marine Park Management Plan in parentheses as an example.
Yes. How's that?
I think that's fine.
Okay. Great, thank you, Toby. Anyone else have any suggestions or thoughts? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised or anything, so I am going to move on to the next slide, which has a few more objectives. So the first one of these is encourage efforts to rehabilitate and or create fishery resource habitats that support ecosystem structure and function. And I'll just note that this was one of the objectives that you all had modified during your meeting in March to include that and or create to rehabilitate and or create fishery resource habitats. I think previously it said encourage efforts to create and rehabilitate fishery resource habitats. And so you just modify this language a little bit. So there's a few draft strategies under there that you all also provided some feedback on previously. Work with federal and territorial management partners and others to identify opportunities for habitat enhancement and restoration, explore opportunities to address the impacts of invasive species on St. Croix fishery habitats, investigate the potential of FADs to mitigate habitat losses and deploy FADs where appropriate, and then identify habitat restoration needs for NOAA's Office of Habitat Conservation grant programs. The next objective was collaborate with management partners to address enforcement concerns that may affect ecological relationships. And there were just a couple strategies here: conducting outreach with NOAA Office of Law Enforcement and DPNR for enforcement personnel regarding ecological impacts of illegal fishing activities, and conduct outreach to permitting agencies on potential impacts of non-fishing activities and development on ecosystem structure and function. And then the last objective here was collaborate with management partners to ensure that ecosystem approaches are responsive to climate and environmental changes. And the draft strategies here were evaluate flexibility of current management approaches to climate change impacts and work with the broader Caribbean community to identify potential impacts to habitats and species distributions from climate change. So are there any additional suggestions or edits or thoughts on these draft strategies here? Marcia.
Surprise. Okay, so on my thing, it says objective 26, collaborate with management. There we go. Okay, so I'd like to add a bullet that says conduct outreach with the fishing community to communicate the impacts of illegal fishing on the health of the resource. And this is a bullet that I saw on the PR list, and I know that we do them separately, but when our colleagues make suggestions that are also useful for us, I think it's important to consider them. And so I would suggest that we add that bullet to ours. And the next objective that has to do with climate and environmental change, I think we need to add and natural disasters, which isn't necessarily considered if we don't specifically say that.
Okay, let me just grab this. So conduct outreach with the fishing community to communicate the impacts of illegal fishing on the health of the resource. And then under this last objective here, you wanted to include natural disasters. Was that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Under the
are
first,
responsive to climate change, comma, environmental changes, comma, and natural disasters. And because I noticed also that Puerto Rico included natural disasters, and I thought that was certainly appropriate for us as well.
So it was climate change, comma, okay.
Environmental changes and natural disasters.
Okay, let me just shrink this a little bit. Okay, thank you, Marcia. So thoughts from other folks or thoughts on what Marcia has offered with respect to the modifications of this third objective? I think silence is agreement. Thank you, Marcia. Okay, if there's no other thoughts on this, then we're going to move on to the next goal theme, which was the social, cultural, and economic issues goal. And so there are 3 objectives here. The first is promote the collection and dissemination of social and economic data that informs management decisions. And then I'll just note that and dissemination is one of the things that you added during your meeting in March. And so the draft strategies here, you also had some additions and modifications. So those are engaged science partners, parentheses, Southeast Fisheries Science Center, academic researchers, Sea Grant, et cetera, and the SSC to identify and prioritize social and economic data gaps and research priorities for St. Croix, work with Sea Grant to ensure social and economic research priorities are incorporated into funding opportunities, identify and use results from existing and completed studies such as Hurricanes Irma and Maria and the COVID assessments. And then the one that you added was ensure that new or existing social and economic science studies collaborate and coordinate with DPNR. The second objective was evaluate the social, cultural, and economic impacts of management decisions and actions across user groups. And there were 3 strategies here to review and document the social and economic impacts of existing St. Croix closed seasons and spawning areas on commercial for hire and recreational stakeholders such as Lang Bank. Ensure that management approaches provide equitable access for commercial and recreational resource users, and work with stakeholders to identify and address commercial and recreational user conflicts. The final objective was consider the impacts of non-regulation, enforcement, and illegal fishing on economic opportunity and social well-being. And the 2 draft strategies here were collaborate with science partners to document the economic impact of illegal unlicensed sales of fish in St. Croix and work with management partners to determine where additional enforcement could improve economic conditions and or trust among commercial and recreational user groups. So are there any recommendations or suggested edits for any of the draft strategies here? Marcia. Oh, sorry, Toby. I didn't see you. So go ahead, Toby, and then Marcia.
No, I was going to say I'll let Marcia go first.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay. Again, I noticed that St. Thomas had an additional objective. Instead of 3 objectives here, they had 4, and I read them and they all seem to apply to us. So let me just read that for the group. They have an objective that says promote efforts to support social and economic opportunity and stability across sectors and fishing communities. Strategies being support community efforts to improve fishing infrastructure across, it would be St. Thomas, including landing and market sites. Develop educational outreach materials to support the use of social media and other virtual approaches to marketing locally caught species. And consider management approaches that address recreational fishing opportunity and satisfaction. And I think all of those are appropriate, and I'd like to suggest we add that objective to St. Croix.
So let me just also note that the reason that that objective was not part of, that there wasn't a similar objective for St. Croix is because when you all were going through and identifying your priorities for this particular theme, both St. Thomas and Puerto Rico had identified that infrastructure needs as a priority, and St. Croix did not. So that was really, I just want to make sure folks understand the genesis of that particular objective.
I would defer to Fishers, but I think infrastructure is important, and especially these other things that talk about promoting local fisheries. I know we talked in great detail about that at our last FAC meeting. So I guess I'd like to hear input from the other St. Croix DAP members.
This is Toby. I would agree with Marcia. Specifically under Objective 24, I added promote boating infrastructure. So I think it would be appropriate to adopt what St. Thomas has indicated.
This is Mike Funk. I would agree with that.
Okay, so let me, what I am going to do here is just make a note to add
It's their objective 34, St. Thomas.
Yep. So we'll add that as another objective along with the same strategies, except wherever it says St. Thomas, St. John, just change that to St. Croix.
Yes.
Great, thanks, Marcia. So I'm assuming that there's no disagreement with that. Okay, great. Any other thoughts on any of the strategies that are here on the screen?
Yes, under the second topic, I would add a bullet to reassess the impact of Buck Island Reef National Monument expansion on recreational and commercial fishers. You may remember that by presidential proclamation, the Buck Island Reef National Monument was expanded by over 14,000 underwater acres of property, and under the guise of protecting coral reefs and 5,000 feet of water, which I don't think is appropriate. And many of the smaller fishing communities, such as Gallows Bay fishermen, relied heavily upon that particular area to fish, particularly when the weather was bad. Not to say that they'd be fishing within the monument, but of course the expanded monument now extended 5 miles from shore.
So Toby, I wrote reassess the impact of the Buck Island Marine National Monument expansion on recreational and commercial fishers. Would you want to, kind of similar to the suggestion you provided previously, would you want to expand this to be more, assess or reassess the impact of, existing or expanded closed areas, for example, Buck Island Marine National Monument, on commercial and recreational fishers, so that it's an approach that could be applied, to other marine managed areas? It is a little bit similar to this first bullet, but I just throw that out there for your consideration to make it a little bit broader than just Buck Island. But I see, let's see, I thought I saw Mr. Chairman with his hand raised.
Yes, good morning. Just to add to what Toby said, also habitat destruction that was caused by the buoys that was put in to mark the boundaries for the Buck Island Monument, along with marking the buoys for navigational to avoid hazards, if that applies.
Okay.
Just to elaborate on it, the buoys were put in and they were put in with too much chain, and they destroyed a circumference. It'd be unfair to say it, how much area was destroyed, but it just pulverized all the coral around there. So you could just imagine how much fish habitat was destroyed.
Okay, I'm just making a note of that, Mr. Chairman, and it seems like that's a very specific activity that the council could perhaps include as part of the implementation plan that we'll be developing for the following year. That's part of this strategic plan. So the implementation plan will include very specific activities that are aligned with these different objectives and strategies. Would that be appropriate, since that's a very specific thing?
I suppose, yeah.
Michelle,
Yes, Miguel.
if I may, the only thing that we can do is to assess the impact of the increased area of the monument. That's it. But we cannot allow to even look at the monuments under the Manson-Stevens Act. And this is something that has been discussed. So I don't mind putting any language in here as long as the language is something that we can do. So in this case, what the council can do is to assess that impact of the increase in monuments in terms of whether we can have information that will tell us whether the increase in the monument size has impact negatively or positively the recreational and commercial fishery of the St. Croix area. So just to be sure that what we recommend to the council is doable and is legal.
Understood. So I think the language of assess the impact or we could make this more specific by saying assess the social and economic impact of the Buck Island Marine National Monument expansion, or again we can make it a little broader, assess the impact of the social and economic impact of new and expanded marine managed areas, e.g. Buck Island Marine National Monument on recreational and commercial fishers. It's up to the group.
I like that last part better than just signaling only one.
Patricia? Hi, Patricia. If you're talking, we can't hear you. You might be muted.
Okay, the last thing that was put there and agreed with Miguel on the Buck Island National Monument, I think is a perfect objective there. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. So Toby, do you mind if the group sort of expands this, but specifically notes the expansion of the Buck Island Marine National Monument as the specific St. Croix example?
I think that it should relate specifically to Buck Island Reef National Monument. And it should be, I'm sorry, Buck Island Reef National Monument.
Is that correct then? Buck Island Reef National Monument expansion?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want to be more specific by noting specifically the social and economic impacts, since that's directly what this objective is related to?
I think that's fine. So stress the social and economic impacts.
Okay, any other thoughts or on this, on these objectives and the draft strategies?
Yes, one more on the very last.
Okay.
I indicated educate hoteliers and restaurateurs the importance of purchasing fish from licensed commercial fishers.
From licensed commercial fishers?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, are there any other suggestions on under this particular goal theme? Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the communication and outreach goal. And so again, this is just the draft goal statement that the council has selected. And, you know, again, these are not island specific. So all three of the district advisory panels provided some additions and suggestions with respect to these objectives and potential strategies. And so this first objective is use a variety of communication tools that consider the social, cultural, and economic characteristics of target audiences in coordination with the OEAP. And that last phrase of in coordination with the OEAP was something that the St. Thomas, St. John DAP had suggested, and the rest of the DAPs agreed. So there's a suite of draft strategies here to continue using the council's social media platforms and explore online and app-based technologies to convey information and updates, develop a catalog of communities, markets, businesses, and individuals with preferences and need for traditional media tools, such as paper, maintain the content and organization of the council's website to enhance its utility to a variety of users, ensure that communication and outreach materials account for stakeholder language preferences, coordinate with management partners, commercial and recreational fishing organizations, non-governmental organizations, and coastal businesses to expand the scope of council communications across new and existing audiences, and consider sector-specific and boat-friendly communication materials. So we do have just a couple more slides that have the other two draft communication and outreach objectives on them, but I'm going to pause here to see if anyone has any thoughts or suggestions on the draft strategies under here. And I'll just note that the OEAP is also reviewing these draft objectives and strategies. Marcia.
Yeah, just a small thing. The second to the last bullet, coordinate with management partners, commercial and recreational fishing organizations and fishers, because on St. Croix, we don't really have a fishers organization, but we have a lot of fishers that should be included in this as well.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Okay, I don't see any hands raised, so let me go ahead and move on to the next objective, which is promote participation of a variety of stakeholders in the council process. So the draft strategies here, we did have an addition that you can see underlined down at the bottom, but these were to increase the frequency of council communications in advance of meetings or events, use a variety of traditional online and social media tools to advertise and remind stakeholders of council meetings and events, expand the use of webinars and conference lines to provide opportunities for remote access, participation, and education, ensure that meetings and events are scheduled to encourage maximum participation, consider development of issue-specific online comment forms to expand opportunities for public input, conduct issue-specific workshops to promote collaborative development of management approaches, develop a newsletter or summary to highlight council meeting outcomes and anticipated actions. And the one that was added was expand and improve participation by new and young fishers in the council process. And I will just note that the council has already developed a little newsletter that they had posted on the website. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that as well. So are there any suggestions or thoughts on the draft strategies under this particular objective? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand, and nobody seems to be jumping in with any suggestions. So I'll go ahead and move on to the last one, which did have some additional suggestions. So this objective is improve public and stakeholder understanding and awareness of fisheries management, current issues, and the council process. And so this had quite a few draft strategies, and some of those, as you can see, were include suggested modifications, some of which were contributed by this district advisory panel. So these were to expand existing non-traditional stakeholder outreach efforts, such as those to restaurants, small-scale grocery store owners and farmers, continue support of the Marine Resource Education Program, also known as MREP workshops throughout the US Caribbean, develop island-specific Puerto Rico, St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix outreach approaches and materials for recreational and commercial fishers, expand the role of fisheries liaisons to improve both fisher and public understanding of fisheries issues in the council process, coordinate with management and science partners to improve the clarity and simplicity of presentations to improve public understanding, partner with other outreach organizations, for example, Pepco and Sea Grant, and federal agencies such as the US Coast Guard, National Park Service, et cetera. And then this was one of the things that was added, and commercial and recreational fishing, diving, and boating organizations to develop and distribute educational materials to fishers, other marine resource users such as divers and the general public, conduct in-person outreach and workshops to improve fisher and public engagement in the council process, and explore partnerships with organizations to capture traditional ecological knowledge of US Caribbean fishing communities. So again, the OEAP is also going to be reviewing these. They've been passed along to Miguel, and he's working with Dr. Alida Ortiz Sotomayor to gather that input. But are there any suggestions? Go ahead, Marcia.
I just have a question. I'm not familiar with the Marine Resource Education Program. Could somebody just tell me, is that a Puerto Rico thing, or where is that taking place now?
It's actually a Caribbean-wide thing, but I'm going to go ahead and defer to Miguel and Graciela, who've been, involved in the development and hosting of those sessions.
In the case of the Marine Recreation Information Program, that was started in New England, and now we have a branch that covers the Gulf, South Atlantic, and the Caribbean. And we meet with fishers and other constituents that is often to obtain information that is important to the U.S. Caribbean in this case. And then we at the meeting, we identified the need for regional education materials, or education ways that we can move forward with promoting the best practices for managing the fisheries. And there we have recreational fishers, commercial fishers, managers, and so forth. They meet for a day or two, and then they discuss issues related to the managing of the fisheries and the best way that we can promote the management best practices in the area. For example, we had one recently, and Graciela attended. It was in La Paguera, and there they discussed issues related to the fisheries of Puerto Rico. And sometimes we include both Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We had one in St. Thomas, and there we were looking at the specifics for the St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix area for the needs that we identify for regional education. Then the outreach and education program that we have through the outreach and education panel adopt recommendation from the Mrips, and at the same time the Mrips also adopt strategy from the outreach and education panel that we have. In a nutshell, that's what we do.
Does that help, Marcia?
Yes, thank you. I just wasn't familiar with that, so thank you.
No problem. So go ahead, Toby.
In the same regard, what is Pepco?
Well, I'm going to ask Cristina Olan to explain what Pepco is.
Hi, Pepco is programa de educación para pescadores comerciales, commercial fishers educational program, and it's developed by the Department of Natural and Environmental Resources in Puerto Rico.
We tried to have this project move to the US Virgin Islands. The project started with Elena Antoon. She's the originator of the program. And she sent to the Division of Fish and Wildlife a long time ago all the materials needed for implementing a similar program in the Virgin Islands. So that's where we are with that one.
And again, so these are great questions. And again, the acronyms. So I will spell out the Pepco acronym. It was really in the interest of space that some of these things have not been spelled out here. Are there any other suggestions or questions or edits to any of the draft strategies under this particular objective?
Yes, one more comment under the very last objective. I would add expand the Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program in St. Croix, but I'm sure it can be related to St. Thomas, St. John as well. The Sea Grant Marine Advisory Service program offers a wealth of programs to commercial and recreational fishers. I know they have over the years in Puerto Rico, but because of budgetary constraints, that's not been available here through the U.S. Virgin Islands.
So I think
nope, that's not the reason. But anyway, the Sea Grant program has a ongoing project at this time with the council to just look at what Toby identified. And I agree with Toby, they need to expand the program. So let's put it here, and I believe that Sea Grant will take note once they see the report from the strategic plan, identifying St. Croix issues.
And so Toby, was it specific to St. Croix or was it the Virgin Islands in general?
Well, I believe this section refers to the Virgin Islands in general, so we can leave it as that.
So support the expansion of the Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program in the Virgin Islands?
Correct.
And hopefully that will support, the Virgin Islands is planning to make an application to become a Sea Grant college as well. So maybe perhaps that will support our application to do that, which will provide more funds, people, and everything.
Great,
And
thank you,
just
Toby.
use US Virgin Islands. They asked me to tell you that.
Oh,
all the time.
yes. Sorry about that. Thank you, Miguel. And so again, just to let folks know, the communication and outreach goal area is really jurisdiction wide. So these are all objectives and draft strategies that would apply throughout the entire U.S. Caribbean jurisdiction. Understanding that the Sea Grant Advisory Program seems to be fairly strong in Puerto Rico. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear on that. Okay, are there any other thoughts or suggestions or questions before we move on? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So I do just want to let folks know what the next steps are. So make this a little bigger for you. So all of the feedback that is being collected from the DAPs today and tomorrow with respect to these draft strategies will be incorporated into a complete draft version of a strategic plan that will be presented to the council on July 21st. And so they will, approve that draft plan. It will be posted on the council's website along with links to an online comment form so that folks can the public has an opportunity to provide any additional feedback on the contents of the draft strategic plan. And then the council will review any of that public feedback and sort of, give its final approval to the strategic plan. And then as I alluded to earlier, I'll be working with Miguel and Graciela to develop an implementation plan for 2022. So with that, I am happy to take any additional questions and turn things back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from Michelle? Excellent presentation, by the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to thank, again, you and all of the district advisory panel members for your patience with this process and for your continued contributions. The council would not have a strategic plan if it was not for everything that you all have been contributing over the past year and a half. So I just want to extend my gratitude to each and every one of you for all of your contributions to this effort. Thanks.
Yeah.
I want to add, is there some more questions? The management plan, the 5-year strategic plan is something that we want to implement rather than just put it in the shelf, like everything that people do without really any teeth to it. That means that the implementation plan for 2022 will have a committee of council members, the chairs of the 3 DAPs, the chair of the SSC, and the chair of the OAAP. And this committee will meet twice a year. In December, they will work together to have a work plan for the next year. And then in the summer, they will meet again to check that work plan. Things that we have done, things that we need to do. And the idea is that we will need to prioritize the things that are important for next year, the things that we can do next year, every year. So the plan will also look at the input of the advisory committees that we have on plan, advisory panels, excuse me, to make sure that the 5-year strategic plan is moving forward in the right direction. Each year we need to identify the priorities. Each year we need to also identify the sources of funding for the actions that are going to be taken in the following year. So the implementation plan for 2022 will call for that committee, and that committee will be named at the August meeting, so they can start working on the priorities for the 2022, 2023, and 24. So we will be really looking at the input of each one of the panels through the chair, so they can be conveyed to the council at each appropriate meeting. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Miguel. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and let you all conclude the meeting.
Michelle, thank you so much. You really appreciate it. Thank you, council and council staff, and happy Father's Day to all you fathers out there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Pat.
We have one other topic. It's just other business, just to mention to Eddie. We sent a letter to each one of the chairs about the use of buoys, deep water, vertical lines, etc. And we will have a meeting one-on-one with the chairs. And so Eddie, Graciela, and I will probably talk to you later, see if you have been able to receive anything from the members. In the case of St. Croix, there are not many fishers who fish deep water, snappers and groupers with the deep water buoys or geared. But we need to have that information, and that information will be submitted via a report from each chair to the council on the 21st. And Eddie, we need to see if you can ask your groups about your members, commercial, recreational, fishers, whether they use this gear or not. And then we can meet with Graciela and I probably sometime next week. That's all we had for today, Mr. Chairman.
okay. Those are those fishers that use it, I'll have to reach out and speak to them. There's a group of young fishermen that started using it with braided line, which is actually a direct strike. They use less weight than using the regular monofilament. And I'll have to reach out to those guys to see if they wanted any input on there with the letter.
Just let us know when you're ready so we can meet with you.
Okay.
So that's all we have, Mr. Chair.
Can I just ask, do we need to vote on this strategy? And I just want to confirm we do have a quorum here. I think we have 7 of us, but is it important for us to vote on this or
No,
not?
you don't need to vote because you did everything by consensus. So you don't really need the quorum. What I really appreciate, I really appreciate you, Toby, and the others members that are here, because all your comments are really on the dot about the things that we needed to cover so we can take this to the council.
Okay, thank you. But we do have 7 of us here, right? Correct, and that's the quorum?
You have 5.
For attendance purposes, real quick, this is Madeline. Sorry, I had some audio issues at the start of the meeting, but I am the official representation for DFW today.
Yeah, so the members include the Virginala. I made a note here that you were serving as a proxy for Nicole Angeli. So all in all, we had the 6 voting members out of the 12.
I think we have more. We have Toby, Carlos, me, Patricia, Mike Funk.
Carlos
is not a member. We counted already, so we have the official number is 6.
Okay, fine.
So Toby, Eddie, you can close the meeting.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. Marsha and Toby, your comments were right up your alley, so your input was very informative to me as well. This meeting is officially closed at 11:50. Thanks.
Thanks.